want to talk today about a topic that may seem very uncomfortable for many: pornography. And although this may imply only for men, women also struggle with the subject, and so it applies with you as well. Pornography has been the greatest fight and struggle that I've had in my life. Ever. The greatest. Hands down, the hardest struggle ever. And it all started before the 3rd grade. I can vividly remember the very first time I experienced porn. And throughout my adolescence, middle and high school, I struggled quite a bit fighting the addiction of it. And although I can say now that I'm victorious and have defeated pornography and no longer watch it, no longer partake in it, it is still an everyday struggle that I fight. Porn is a huge epidemic. It is like a drug epidemic, you guys. It is huge. I was looking up many statistics online, and they all say about the same thing. 28,288 people watch porn every single second. Well, 3 to 5 seconds have passed by, so you can kind of do the math and imagine about how many people are watching porn. Like 37 new videos each day, 25%, 1/4 of the internet searches are all about porn. In fact, 12% of the entire internet is one subject: porn. 35% of downloads are not music, they're not educational articles, they're all porn. And the men who admitted, 70% of men, 18 to 24, openly admitted they watched porn at least once in a month. And I would argue the statistics are probably much higher and much more frequent than that. Nobody likes to admit it or acknowledge it, but the fact is, this is an epidemic in our country, and quite frankly in the entire world. So why care? What does it do? What does porn do? What's so bad about it? Well, porn is literally like a drug. I mean, it creates these perfect conditions in your brain, and it triggers this release, this unnatural release of an unnatural amount of dopamine. An unnatural amount of chemicals get released. It releases dopamine just like a drug like ecstasy, heroin, cocaine, Molly, in a similar way that those drugs would do. It just dumps it all out, rushes it through into the body. And all the experiences associated with that rush become so deeply imprinted in the mind. And it's why a lot of people end up having this imprint, this memory of porn that sticks with them and becomes an addiction every day, that fact alone. And because it's like a drug, you just need more and more of it every single time. It's why some people spend their entire life living porn. I mean, they spend hours and days just watching it. And they even reenact it and act it out in these fake relationships. It's so devastating. But it's very powerful in that way. Just like a drug. And the other associations, like love, intimacy, sex, the human body, women's body, men's body, all of those get tainted. They get blended in with that emptiness that porn has. Porn gets into those topics of love and body and intimacy, those things that God had created to be good and true, become empty and tainted with the darkness of porn. It's why we see a lot of boys in men's body going around looking for one thing in girls, just sex. And why we see many girls following along in that game, thinking that it's the norm because so many boys do it. what God created to be good becomes tainted into something bad. So porn has the effect of imprinting and becoming an addicting drug, and gets into the realms of what God intended to be good and true, and changes it and blends it into this emptiness that porn is. Now talk about the spiritual consequences too. Porn takes us further from God's love. I mean, God intended us to have a fulfilling sex life. He intended us to be with our partner in marriage, to have a good sex life that's fulfilling and that brings intimacy and closeness. Porn causes us to miss the mark. Porn causes a fake type of fulfillment that just may leave you feeling good, but then afterward feeling greatly empty, desiring more, and without intimacy, feeling lonely, depressed, and far. It takes you further away from marriage and authentic sex. So as an adolescent, I remember hearing a lot of guys, older guys, talking about how to overcome pornography and how to win the fight. And I used to say, oh, easy for you guys to say. Easy for you. You're married. You probably have sex all the time. But I'm 12, 13 years old. Don't have a girlfriend. I don't partake in that. It's challenging. But now that I am standing here in their shoes, married and then older than they are actually, I can honestly say that actually doesn't matter. Whether you're married or not, or whatever age you are, you're still in the same ball field. You're still struggling with it, and the temptation is still there, equally still there. Just because you're married or having sex doesn't take away the addiction and the temptation of porn. It's a darkness in its own realm, completely separate from that. So, honestly, how do we get close to winning the fight then? I can sit here now and say, number one, worship God. Worship all the time. And it's hard, I get it, because sometimes you just don't want to worship, or it's boring, or you don't know how to. But go to church. Sing songs. Try to get into the Bible. Think about God. Just think about Him. Worship God. Worship brings us closer to God and further from sin. Worship is the natural antidote to sin. Number two, find people that you can hang out with. It'd be great if you can find Christian people who can even relate with you and be your accountability partner. But if you don't have that, just hang out with others. Stick with other people. Avoid being alone too much, because it's when you're alone that you become really vulnerable to sin, really vulnerable to pornography and the temptation of it. It's the devil's strategy. It's the enemy's tactic to get you when you're alone. Number three is run. When you feel tempted, just go and do something else. Literally, a lot of times it's because you're just sitting there in the same spot on technology, right in front of your face, just kind of laying there, and then boom, it hits you. Well, get up. Leave the place. Leave the room. Go clean if you have to. Go for a walk if you have to, but leave that area, because it's the atmosphere. Literally, it's the darkness in that atmosphere that's tempting you. It's there, and you've got to just get up and leave it. And lastly, understand the consequences that I mentioned, the effects that it has, the drug-like effect, the associations that become blended in with that addiction that causes these aggression and causes you to reenact this and desire more and more. The separation of God, taking you further from marriage and intimacy with other people. Think about the consequences. And remember, these are God's daughters, God's sons. So for men out there, protect God's daughter. Stand up for them. And for girls out there, for women out there, encourage God's sons. Encourage them, empower them in the path of righteousness. So in closing, here's what I have to say. Remember, porn is not just porn. Porn is addicting, like a drug, and it will change your brain, literally with the release of dopamine. It will change and affect your body in its chemical balance. And it will change and affect your spirit for the worse. Take you further from God. In closing, number 2, porn takes you further from a sex life that brings intimacy and fulfillment with your significant other, with your spouse. It takes you further from marriage. It takes you further from being feeling fulfilled and intimate with others. And remember ways to overcome this. Worship God. Stick with your buddies. Stick with other people. Hopefully those that can be accountable for you. Run from the place. Literally just run from there. And remember the consequences. Care for God's daughter. Encourage God's sons. We can do this. I know that it seems hard. It seems impossible. You get these seasons of abstaining from porn and then fall back into it. I understand some of those patterns because I've been through that. But it's not impossible defeat. It's not an impossible struggle. It is possible to overcome it. Love God, worship God, love God more, and you'll find yourself overcoming it.
Jesus, I surrender. Show me what I don't know, more of you. I'm desperate for your presence, longing to be with you. Bring me to a new place, more of you. Now until forever, Jesus, I surrender. Show me what I don't know, more of you. Desperate for your presence, longing to be